بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وبارك على أشرف الأنبياء ومرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا أما بعد فحياكم الله جميعا وبارك الله فيكم. Alhamdulillah, in the previous lesson we concluded the discussion around the wuḍū and the sifatul wuḍū and the description of how the wuḍū is performed, and thereafter we went on to discuss and begin the chapter in relation to the masḥ al-khuffayn, yani wiping over the socks, the leather socks. And before we continue, just going back to the previous chapter in relation to the discussion around the wuḍū, we were discussing the wuḍū and the sifatul wuḍū, the description of the wuḍū. We mentioned, barakallahu fikum, a narration, and alhamdulillah, brothers brought it to my attention, the narration. It's da'f, the weakness in the narration. And the narration was where it mentioned يعني هذا وضوئي ووضوء مرسلين قبلي. Yeah, this is my wudu and the wudu of the mursaleen, يعني the messengers that came before me, that preceded me. And this narration in reality is weak narration. Now this narration is used as a proof to say that the washing of the body parts should be done 3 times. Now, it's used as a proof that the washing of the body parts can be done twice or 3 times. There's twice and 3 times also mentioned within the same narration. However, this narration as mentioned, this is the narration which has a weakness within it, and what should be used as a proof for this particular hukum, because the hukum is correct. What should be used as a proof for this particular hukum is the hadith in which it mentions that in the Prophet ﷺ, tawadda'a marratan marra, yani once and once again, or marratain, and twice, and using washing the body parts twice, each part, wa thalathan, or it is washed 3 times. This narration thus is a sahih narration in that regard, and this is a narration which should be used as the dalil rather than the previous mentioned narration which is found in some of the explanations of this particular text. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. And so that's just a small point or nuqta that we wanted to mention before we went on to go on to what we want to discuss today, which is the conclusion of the chapter of the masḥ al-khuffayn, yani wiping over the body parts, or wiping over the socks rather. And first and foremost, as we mentioned, the hukum, the ruling of wiping over the leather socks is that it is permissible. It's permissibility. And not only is it permissible to wipe over the leather socks, but then there's a narration that mentioned the permissibility of wiping over the socks which are regarded as cotton, and the socks that most people wear on a daily basis. And we went on to discuss some of the shurut, some of the conditions of wiping over the socks. Does anyone remember some of those conditions? What are the conditions for wiping over the socks?
You should have wudu before.
Now, so you have to be in a state of purity when you put those socks on. Now, so if you intend to wipe over the socks at a given point in time, then you have to be in a state of purity. Now, what else?
It starts after the timing of the time you can leave your socks from when you start wiping and how to see properly. Basically, it starts from when you wipe over your socks.
It has, so this is, but is that a condition in order for it to be correct? So what are the conditions for it to be correct first? So as you mentioned, you have to be the state of purity. That's a condition for it to be correct. Now, the amount of time you wear them, so now, that you do not exceed the time period. Now, so that's a condition now. You don't exceed the time period. The time period is what?
24 hours for visit, 3 days for travel.
No. And how is it explained in terms of the nusus? Or how is it described in terms of the nusus?
The wiping begins, the time period begins when you first wipe, not when you first put your socks on.
After what I mean in terms of how is it described in terms of nusus? You mentioned 24 hours now, which we accept, of course, but how is it described in terms of nusus in the text so that we know it's a day? It was for one full day. Necessarily that. But it mentions that the time period is a day and a night. A day and a night. So we understand from that to be a one full day and one full night, i.e. A day completely. And so this is for every single individual, this time period?
Not for the Salafi.
Not for the Musafir. So this for who then? For the day of the time period of 1 day, 1 night is for the resident. The Musafir then? 3 days, 3 nights. Now, so 3 days, 3 nights for the Musafir. Jade, so that's the second condition. Now, so the first is that the person has to wear the socks in a state of purity. The second condition is that they cannot exceed the time period. So, depending on whether they're a resident or a traveller, that time period will differ. Now, the third condition. The third condition.
You can't take your socks off during that period.
That you can't take your socks off during that period.
If you want to wipe over it, you wipe out. If you want to wipe over it, you can't take your socks off and put it back on and wipe on.
There's some ulama say that you can't do that. But for Allah's best, the strongest opinion is that you can. That you can take, because the tahara, your state of purity, is attached to you as the individual, and it's not attached to the socks. Does that make sense?
It's only for minor impurities.
Jay, that's the third condition. So you understand that last point though? So the tahara is you. So when you make wudu, for example, is it the body parts which are we saying is upon purity, or is it we saying it's you that's upon purity?
With the socks on.
Forget the socks. Let's just say you're just making wudu now. Now, the person is upon purity.
Yeah.
Now, so now if we're saying that the person's made wudu, and the same scenario he's wiped over the socks, right? Still the same thing, he's upon purity. So we're not going to say now the removal of the socks removes his purity, because then we would have to say that if we know the socks removes his purity, that this is from the nawaqid al wudu.
But I mean, if he takes it off, basically puts it back on, and makes sure it's outside.
Now, if he takes it off, because then that would oppose the condition, that first condition. Now, so if he takes the socks off and then breaks the wudu now and puts the socks back on, then he's opposed the first condition, which was what? He has to have purity when putting them on. So he's opposed that first condition. But what I was discussing just then is if the person, he has wudu, then he takes the socks off, then he doesn't break his wudu, then he puts the socks back on. Now, is he in the state of purity still? He's in the state of purity still.
Because you can pray without his socks on. What about in terms of wiping over the socks? Again, can you, so like if you take, you in the state of purity?
No.
Socks. Is it the fact that you took your socks off now and then put them back on? The socks is not a condition. No, but then...
So you're saying if the person was to make wudu,
yeah, he makes wudu.
no, then he takes the socks off.
No, but maybe he ends up like making wudu again and now he starts.
Now you start to wipe all the socks. Okay.
Over the socks, but now for some reason he takes his socks off.
He takes his socks off, okay.
Puts his socks back on now.
They just put the socks back on.
Yes.
Whilst it's in the wudu.
Why is it wudu? Yeah.
Yes.
So, does that mean that basically you can still wipe from there?
You can still carry on wiping from there. Because he's put them on. The main thing is that he's fulfilled that condition of putting the socks on whilst in a state of purity. So even if he's taken them off at some point, for whatever reason, but he's put them on whilst still in a state of purity, he's still able to carry on wiping from that. Now, does that make sense? Clear? Jade? No.
Just on that point, the wiping he does first.
The wiping does first.
Still in wudu, takes his socks off.
He takes socks off, okay?
Puts them back on. The first wiping is from the first time or when he wipes again?
The first wiping,
Time period starts from the first wipe, yeah?
from the first time he's wiped the socks.
That's it.
So the person can't keep changing the socks and say, I'm going to start a new wiping, basically.
No, I mean, yeah, the actual wiping, what
No.
the still in wudu he did,
No.
took off his socks,
Took his socks?
maybe put some clean socks on.
Yes.
Now the wiping started from that first time, not when he's re-put his socks on.
No, the wiping starts from the first time. No. Wallah. And so those are the three conditions we mentioned last week. We missed one, which was what? We mentioned it afterwards, if you remember.
To do with the traveller?
No, something to do with the wiping. It was condition for the wiping. Or something to do, more specifically, something to do with the sock.
Does it have to be like a...
Above the ankle?
No, it has to cover the ankle. So it has to cover the ankle. So those are the 4 conditions. Now, we go over them again. So the first of them is what?
Must have wudu.
You have to be in a state of purity when putting them on. The first of them is that he has to be in a state of purity when putting them on. Now, we have to wait. Let's wait for Ibrahim. I got in trouble today, subhanAllah. He told me, why did you said you were going to listen for 2 weeks and the lesson was on today. The lesson was on last week, we missed it. So, khalas. Let's wait for Ibrahim. Now, so the first condition is that you have to, when you put the socks on, you have to be in a state of purity. Now, the second condition for wiping the socks, that you do not exceed the time period. What is that time period?
The resident, it's a day and a night.
Day and night for the one that's resident. 3 days, 3 nights for the one that is a traveller. Third, it can only be done for the minor impurity. So the person cannot say that they're wiping over their socks to remove the janaba. Just on that point as well, what's the proof of that? We mentioned the proof of that it's not for the minor, it's not for the major impurity. Safwan ibn Assal. Now, Safwan ibn Assal. So it's due to the narration of Safwan ibn Assal, in which the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentions. What did he mention, alayhi salatu wasalam?
One is traveling and he should remove his socks for 3 nights unless in Janaba.
No, we should not remove the socks for 3 days or 3 nights, unless in Janaba. It's day to Janaba. And then the fourth thing we mentioned after that then, it has to cover the ankle. Now, Jade, so this is the affair of the masah ala khuffayn, and also we discussed when it begins, and it begins from the time of the first wiping of the sock. Thereafter, Ibn Qudāmah, he mentions, raḥimahullāh, وَمَتَى مَسَحَ ثُمَّ انقضت المدة أو خلع قبلها بطلت طهارته. And so here is mentioned that when the person does the wiping and then the end of that time period comes, so it comes to the end of the time period, so depending on who it is, whether it's the resident or the traveller, the time period comes to an end, and then the person or the person removes the socks, then this nullifies the person's state of purity. This nullifies the state of the person's purity. So, we mentioned previously the time period. Now, I mentioned previously the time period. As for the time period elapsing and coming to an end, then this is clear. Then this is the end of the person's purity, and then they have to perform the wudu in full, as mentioned. Now, thereafter we mentioned, and we discussed briefly this, the mas'ala if the person takes off the socks. Now, if the person takes off the socks, and it's possible that what has been alluded to here is that the person, if they take off the socks, then this is something that nullifies the wudu. Now, when he takes off the socks, it's something that nullifies the wudu. But for most apparently, this isn't the case. Now, for most apparently, this isn't the case. Now, the removal of socks doesn't nullify the wudu. No.
What are you saying about after the period has finished?
Yeah.
And you're in a state of purification, does that mean that basically you're not in purity? And even if you're in a state of purity, after that period you have to make wudu, or is it when you break your wudu then you have to?
What's apparent is from when you break the wudu after that time. So it's not possible for the person to continue to carry on wiping over the socks after that time. That's what is understood from them. Wallah. And as we discussed as well, removing the socks, if we say removing the socks in a state of purity, this doesn't now mean that the person can or has to make wudu again. No. The only need to make wudu again is if they had broken their wudu whilst the socks were off. No. So if they enter a state of impurity whilst the socks were off, then they would have to renew the wudu.
What if the socks have holes?
No. So then some people discuss as well when you ask about the socks if they have holes. The reality is, and Allah Ta'ala knows best, is that even if they do have holes in them, then this isn't something which nullifies this. Something that they can still wipe over the socks. As long as it is still regarded as being a sock, and it's still something which is generally understood to be worn and can be worn, then it can be wiped over as long as it's a sock which, of course, covers the ankle. Now, so the main thing is about it covering the ankle, and not about the state of the sock. Let's say. No, it's not the issue. Wallah. Now, and thereafter, Qudāmah mentions, وَمَنْ مَسَحَ مُسَافِرًا ثُمَّ أَقَامَ. Now, so then, if the person wipes over the socks whilst they're a traveller, and then they become a resident, or the opposite as well, they are a resident, they become a traveller. أَتَمَّ الْمَسْحُ الْمُقِيمِ. And so, here is mentioned that if the person wipes over the socks there and they're a resident, or wipes over the socks rather and they're a traveller, so they're travelling, but they're travelling maybe back to their residence. Once they reach back to their residence, then they wipe over the socks. They can only wipe over the socks for the period of how long? A day and a night. Either mess of the muqim. And here as well, the opposite is true. Now, the opposite is true, and what opposite is also mentioned, and this is the call of the Imam Ahmad, raḥimahullah, the opinion of Imam Ahmad, where he mentions if the person is also muqim, so he is a resident, and then becomes a traveller, but he began wiping as a resident, then in this scenario, he is still only permitted to wipe for a day and a night. Now, is the distinction clear? So one of them, he was a traveller, then becomes a resident. Now, generally speaking, this is Amr Yasir, as an easy one. Now, he was a traveller, then becomes a resident. So he's a resident, essentially. So he's only permitted to wipe for a day and a night. However, the second individual, he was a resident, then became a traveller. But he's also only permitted to wipe for a day and a night. Why? Why is it the same thing?
Because
The niyyah, not necessarily niyyah. I mentioned it before, but I slipped it in. The question clear?
No.
Jay.
Just don't have the answer.
And Muhim, the question is clear. So then, as they say, نصف الجواب فهم السؤال. نصف الجواب فهم السؤال. يعني half of the answer is understanding the question. So the question is clear, alhamdulillah. طيب. So we said the first person is right, that's clear. The second person, he was a resident and he became a traveller. But, as we mentioned, he wiped first when?
He was
As a resident. He first did the first time he wiped was as a resident. So, irrespective of him now becoming a traveller, as mentioned by Imam Ahmed, in this regard, he takes the rule in terms of the wiping as the resident still. Now, this is what is mentioned in that regard. Allah Ta'ala knows best. Now, thereafter, Ibn Qudāmah mentions ويجوز المسح على الإمامة إذا كانت ذات ذؤابة يعني ساترة لجميع الرأس. And so, likewise as well, he mentions it's permissible to wipe over the imama. Now, to wipe over what is regarded as the turban, as long as that turban has something or what it can be referred to as a tail, an ending to it. Now, so there has to be an ending to the turban. Then it's permissible. On the condition that it is something that covers over the whole head. So it has to cover the whole head. طيب. The first thing, as we mentioned, is the turban. The permissibility to wipe over the turban. The proof for that is the hadith of Mughira, in which he said, توضأ رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ومسح على خفين والعمامة. The hadith of Mughira, he mentions that the Messenger of Allah صلى الله عليه وسلم performed the wuḍū, and then he wiped over the khuffayn, so he wiped over the socks, and then he wiped over the imama, wiped over the turban. And this is hadith sahih, which is found in Sahih Muslim. According to Sahih Muslim. And likewise as well, what is conditional for this turban is that the turban has an ending to it, as was mentioned, the tail ending to it. What is the reason for this condition?
The tail.
No. What is the reason for the condition?
It's not turban unless it's not clear.
It's not regarded as being a turban. Now, it could still be regarded as being an imama. It could still be regarded as being an imama, a turban. But there's something specific as to why it has to have that ending.
Is it because it's hard to put on? You have to look at it.
Not like that either. No, that is not for the difficulty of putting it on.
when you make sujood and stuff, it's
You make sujood?
you know, like say like so your whole thing makes sujood when you're portraying like your garments and stuff in it, like when it's you shouldn't have it a certain way or like
Okay, wrapped.
yeah.
No, not necessarily that either.
It's like maybe because the like socks have the one of them conditioned to the ankle, and we're gonna do masa on our head. There's condition till the yeah maybe
No.
no.
Well, I understand the reason, mashallah. Now, the socks to the ankle, no. But the reason why the socks are to the ankle is because of now that you wash the feet up to the ankle. But I understand now.
Is
No.
it to do with because when you make thing you should do it to your neck? So if you have normally if you just cover your head,
No.
covering your neck area.
And it's similar to what you mentioned, but it's not, no, not what it is. It's a good reason, to be fair. The reason why, essentially, is that it is due to the fact that the turban that was worn, that has been worn without the tail, is something which was known to be from the people that oppose Islam. The people that oppose Islam. And the kuffar, yeah, essentially. And so no doubt we are commanded to oppose them. We're commanded to oppose them.
Like the Jewish, they wear small tiny hats, like this one, to oppose it, to have a take.
No, this is something different because they may wear big hats, but the turban as well is something that was known from the people that oppose Islam, and so this is a mas'ala of opposing ahlul batil, opposing the people of batil. And so this is why it's conditional to have this. Likewise as well, from the condition is that the person wears the turban upon the state of tahara. From his conditions is that the person wears it upon the state of tahara. No, the person wears it upon the state of tahara. So it's the same affair in relation to the khuffayn. That from the conditions of the khuffayn, or the condition of the socks, is that in order for it to be accepted, that the person wore those socks whilst they're in a state of tahara, yani purity. Now, and the proof for that is the hadith of Mughira, and it's the same hadith which is used for understanding that the person is in the state, or the person has to wear the socks in the state of purity. And it's a statement of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam when he mentioned in relation to the socks, دعهما فإني أدخلتهما طاهرتين فمسح عليهما. So he mentions, leave them, I leave the socks, where he went to remove them on behalf of the Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam. He mentions, leave them, I leave the socks, for indeed I wore them upon a state of purity. So we understand that any form of wiping must be done on a state of purity. So the ruling for the imama is used and is taken from the ruling upon the socks. Likewise, you have the mention where you Jews al-mashu ala al-Jābirī. But this is also the mention that it's permissible to wipe over some form of bandaging. The permissibility of wiping over the bandaging. Now, to wipe over the bandaging, as is mentioned. However, the discussion around this is based upon a hadith which is found in the Sunan of Ibn Majah, and this narration is regarded as being da'if. The narration itself is regarded as being da'if. This is the narration found in the Sunan of Ibn Majah. And that's likewise the Sunan of Abu Dawud, where it's mentioned that there was the wiping over the bandage upon the head, and that it's permissible to perform the tayammum and then wipe over that bandaging. Allah Ta'ala knows best. What we understand from this is that in this scenario, in reality, that tayammum should be done in place of that, and not the wiping over the bandage. Wallahu a'lam. And thereafter as well, you have the mentioning وَالرَّجُلُ وَالْمَرْأَةُ فِي ذَلِكَ سَوَاءٌ. So the man and the woman in relation to that particular ruling are the same. Meaning what? Is that what it means when saying that ruling? And the socks. Slipped in the bit of the end. And the socks. Now, so are we saying that the when it says the men and the women are the same, we say the men and the women are the same with the socks or the imam? Both.
It refers to probably the imam, but in reality I would say it's both the same.
No. So the first thing is, the discussion is when it comes to the socks, of course, the men and the women are the same. So the khitab and the address is for men and the women. That it's permissible for the men to wipe over the socks for a period of 2 days. Is kadhalik? Better? No. So it's permissible for the men and the women to both wipe over the socks for 2 days. Now?
1 day and 1 night.
1 day and 1 night. Just make sure everyone's awake. Now, 1 day and 1 night. Now, 1 day and 1 night. If they are residents. And then, in terms of the musafir, 3 days, 3 nights. This is in relation to the ruling of the men and the women. The same. As for the imama, then, of course, as we mentioned, it's permissible for the man. Now, but it's not permissible for the woman. It's not permissible for the woman. Why? And don't think too hard.
Because a woman should already, she have to cover herself, and she's not allowed to go outside.
She has to cover herself anyway.
Yeah.
No.
You're supposed to be wearing a turban though.
Huh? Now, so it's not permissible for the woman because the imama is not permissible for a woman to wear. It's from the libas of the rijal. Now, so the socks, of course, we can say that the socks are for the men and the women to wear. Men and women can wear socks. So this is why the ruling is for both men and women. As for the imama, then the imama is for the men only because it's from the libas of the rijal. It's specific for the clothing of the men. Now, make sense? Jail. However, after that then is the question arises, is it permissible for the woman to wipe over the khimar, or what we refer to generally now as hijab? Now, can she wipe over the khimar? And Shaykh bin Baz, raḥimahullāh, he mentions the following. ليس لها ذلك. I said she's not able to do so. بل عليها أن تمسح الرأس نفسه كما أن الرجل يمسح رأسه أيضا. And so he mentions here that she doesn't have the ability to do so. No, she doesn't have the ability to wipe over the hijab. Rather, what is upon her is to wipe over the head itself directly, as is upon the man to wipe over the head. لكن إذا كان الخمار قد حنكت به رأسها وشق عليها نزعه مسحت عليه يوما وليلة إذا كانت لبسته على طهارته. So, Shaykh goes on to mention further though, that if she ends up wearing this khimar and it is a difficulty for her to remove it, so it's wrapped in a particular way where there's difficulty for her to remove it, then she has the ability to wipe over it. Right? So due to the mashaqqa, due to the hardship upon her in terms of removing it and wiping over the head, then she has the ability and she's able to wipe over it for the period of 1 day and 1 night, with the condition that she did what? She put it on while she was in a state of purity. Naam. So you put it on whilst in a state of purity. And that, alhamdulillah, is from the kalam, from the speech of a Shaykh Ibn Baz, raḥimahullah. There's some of our mashayikh mentioned from them, Shaykh ʿUbayd, raḥimahullah. Now Shaykh Ibn Baz, who is the Shaykh al-Islam of our time. Shaykh Ibn Baz, Shaykh Abdul Ibn Baz, raḥimahullah. The Shaykh al-Islam of our time. Nah, wallah. Thereafter, we have the next section, which is the Bab Nawaqid al-Wuḍū. So the chapter in relation to the nullifiers of the wudu. What nullifies your wudu? And we've mentioned some of these, we just had a discussion around some of these in relation to the nullifiers of wudu when we were going through the shurut al-salah.
What's nullified?
Things that break your wudu.
Oh,
Nah, the things that break your wudu. And Ibn Qudāmah raḥimahullah, he mentions وهي سبع, that there are 7. He says الخارج من السبيلين على كل حال وخارج النجس من غيرهما إذا فحش. And so the first we mentioned is anything that leaves the sabilain, so leaves from the private parts or the back passage. Anything that exits from this in any regard is regarded as something that breaks the wudu. And so this goes back to 2 affairs. There are 2 things. The first thing is a hadath, as something which is a nullifier and an impurity, and something where ma fi hukm al-hadath. So you have the impurity, and it's something that is that takes the same ruling as the impurity. So, no doubt, any form of impurity that leaves from the front or back passage, then this is something that we understand is an impurity and nullifies the wudu. As well as anything that is an impurity or anything that takes that same ruling as well. Now, in relation to that affair, then we understand as well that anything that is anything that leaves from front and back passage is regarded as something that breaks the wudu. And the exception to that is al-mani, meaning semen. Now, the exception to that is semen. Why? So does that break the wudu? Why? Why is it an exception? Semen.
It's impure.
It's impure. But then why? What's the difference between, for example, urine and semen? The semen isn't, but then we're talking about something that breaks the wudu.
All the ruling on what you do
Ruling what you do, I think you might be right, but maybe you're wrong. See, now, this is the clear difference. So generally speaking, generally speaking, anything that leaves from the body parts, or leaves from the sabilain, the front or back passage, necessitates that the person makes wudu. So it nullifies the minor, or it causes minor impurity, except for many, except for semen, because this causes major impurity. Now, this is the clear difference, the distinction between the two. And so, as for the one that is mustayqid, as for the one that is awake, and he is aware of the semen exiting, and this is something which occurs usually with desire, then it's an obligation upon the person to purify themselves with ghusl. It's upon the person to make ghusl. As for the na'im, as for the one that is sleeping, then it's upon the individual to make the ghusl if he just by seeing the many or the remnants of that. So anything from the semen or that was left over from the semen, then it's upon that individual to perform the ghusl. So the reasons for it, so there's two types of person that will have to make ghusl. Like in terms of the semen. The one that's sleeping, the one that's awake. The one that's awake, say the one that's awake first, is if he's aware of it, and he generally becomes aware of it by way of desire. And so then upon that individual is to perform the ghusl. The second one, of course, he doesn't sense if any form of desire because he's sleeping. So it's upon that individual to perform the ghusl if he sees the many. If he sees the semen. Wallahu a'lam. Now, thereafter, it mentions na'am, that which exits the body from other than the front or back passage. Na'am, the najis, min ghayrihima, so that which is impure, the excess that comes out of the body from other than the front or back passage, and it's in large amounts. Now, so it's the voluminous amounts which causes a degree of repulsion or disgust. And so, this is the second thing that's mentioned. And this condition here, these najasat, then the najasat, these forms of impurities, you may be referring to excrement or urine. So for example, excrement or urine, if this exits from another part of the body, then this does break the wudu. Now this is clear. This is the first thing. So something that's like excrement or urine, and this breaks the wudu. Is this something which is possible? Of course. There's some people, for example, they may have had operations, and they have what is referred to as a stoma bag, where the waste doesn't actually leave from the front or back passage anymore, but it leads directly from the colon to a bag. Now, and so it's exited the body, it's left the body, but not by way of these two body parts. So upon that understanding and upon that ruling, is that the person will have to make wudu. Now, again, that's the first type. So the first type is or the impurities, which is from, for example, the excrement or the urine. The second type is impurity such as blood, vomit or pus. Blood, vomit or pus. And as for the hukm, as for the ruling of that, then in reality, the blood that may exit the body, then this does not break the wudu. And the proof for that, and Allah Ta'ala knows best, is the narration that mentions narration where the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam commanded the woman that had the istihada, the irregular bleeding, commanded her to perform the wudu for each salah. That is narration. Why is that a proof? The question clear?
Because basically she was bleeding.
No.
Still bleeding while she was praying for him.
She was still bleeding?
She could be bleeding even in a state of salah. So in that Ali radiallahu anhu used to have similar conditions.
Now,
And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam taught wudu at the end of every salah.
and it's commanded to make wudu at the beginning of each salah. Now, and we understand from this is that now, as for the blood, it's particular amount of blood. That they did not. It wasn't that blood itself that nullified the wudu. It was a case of the fact that the washing had to be done to remove the blood, and due to that washing, the wudu had to be done. And this is the reason, and not that it was something where because no doubt if it was the bleeding of the haid, of the menses, then it would necessitate ghusl afterwards. But this isn't the case. Now, thereafter, you have the example of the qayh and the example of the vomit and the pus. The Shaykh ʿUbayd, raḥimahullāh, he mentions that he does not know of any particular or specific proof that mentions this particular affair or these particular substances which break the wudu. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. Now, thereafter, it mentioned from the nullifiers of the wudu is the zawal al-aql. Zawal al-aql إلا النوم اليسير جالسا أو قائما. So, thereafter, you have the mentioning as well of the things that break the wudu is the removal of the person's intellect. Right, so the person loses the faculties. And this is except for so the person loses awareness except for a light sleep whilst the person is sitting or standing. The person is light sleep except they are sitting or standing. So as for the zawal al-aql, as for the person that loses the senses, then this is something which is encompasses different affairs. Now I mentioned different affairs. So the losing of the intellect can occur in different ways. From these ways is that the person becomes intoxicated. So that they drink alcohol, for example, and they become intoxicated. The second, or another way, is what has been alluded to here, is that the person goes to sleep. That the person goes to sleep. And another way, and the third, is that the person becomes or enters a state of insanity. They become insane. And what is meant here, and Allah Ta'ala knows best, from this affair, where he mentions the light sleep, then he's mentioning it as an exception to the one that is sleeping lying down. Because some Ahlul mentioned that the one that sleeps whilst lying down, then this is the individual that is in a sleep. And regardless of whether it can be referred to as a deep sleep or not. While sleeping lying down, and this is regarded as being in a state of sleep. And so thus this is where the person they break the wudu. Now they break the wudu. However, if a person, and some mention as if a person is sitting while sleeping, then this cannot be regarded as being a deep sleep. In reality, when we refer to a sleep which is a deep sleep, then the position of the person or where the person is found or how they are sleeping is not of the most importance and uppermost importance. What is the most important is if it is a deep sleep or not. So for example, if the person is sleeping and they are called, someone calls them. Someone calls them whilst they're sleeping. But doesn't raise a voice. And they wake up immediately. This is an indication that they weren't in the deep sleep. Now, because the one that is in the deep sleep, and the reason why the distinction is made in terms of sleep with it being a deep sleep is because the person is no longer aware of their faculties. And so that's the person, they break the wuḍū. And this is how we understand this affair. So this is the example that was given by Shaykh and Shaykh ʿUbayd. They mentioned if the person was to be called in a normal voice, you call them in a normal voice, not raise the voice. Some of the deep sleep, if you shout at them, then everyone's going to wake up. But if you call them in a normal voice, normal volume, and they tend to wake up, then this is, we understand this is what is light sleep. And so thus this particular form of sleep doesn't break the wuḍū. And Allah Ta'ala will bless it. We'll conclude here, inshaAllah Ta'ala. And bi'idhnillahi ta'ala in the next lesson, go on to discuss some of the other affairs which may break the wuḍū. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. Jazakumullah khairan. Wa barakallahu feekum. Wa sallallahu wa barak ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam.